is always glorious in human society, and certainly keeps such literature at home and offers respectful obeisances to it. And he becomes freed from all sinful reactions and ultimately becomes worshipable by the demigods. It is also said in the Narad, by Narad Muni, to Narad Muni, sorry. My dear Narad, a person who writes Vaishnava literature and keeps such literature at home has Lord Narayan always residing in his house. It's quite a good one, isn't it? Synchronicity. Of all the times we read it, we're coming now to the peak of the book distribution marathon. A person who writes Vaishnava literature and keeps such literature at home has Lord Narayan always residing in his house. In Srimad Bhagavatam 12th canto, 13th chapter, verse 15, it is stated, Srimad Bhagavatam is the essence of all Vedanta philosophy. Any person who has become attached in some way or other to the reading of Srimad Bhagavatam cannot have any taste for reading any other literature. In other words, a person who has relished the transcendental bliss of Srimad Bhagavatam cannot be satisfied with mundane writings. Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhupada ki jai. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So we're reading the Canto 7, Chapter 10. This chapter is entitled Prahlad, the best among exalted devotees. So the next text does not have a purport, but the next one does. So I'll read the first two. Ya etat punyan akyanam Vishno varyo. Sorry, this is text 46. Varyo prabhamitam krityek chadraya shrutva karma pasya vimuchyate. Translation. One who hears and chants this narration about the omnipotence of the Supreme Personality of Godhead Vishnu is certainly liberated from material bondage without fail. So it's interesting, isn't it, that omnipotence is significant because Lord Nrsingadev was everywhere. Hiranyakashipu was saying, is he here? Is he there? He says, he's everywhere, Father. Is he in this pillar? Yep. So text 47. Etad yad adi purushasyan mringranda lilam dacyantra yutaya pavadam prayata pateta dayitya majasa cha satam pravasya punyam shrutavanu bhavam akuto bhayam eti lokam. Prahlad Maharaj was the best among exalted devotees. Anyone who with great attention hears this narration concerning the activities of Prahlad Maharaj, the killing of Hiranyakashipu, and the activities of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Nrsingadev, surely reaches the spiritual world where there is no anxiety. And now text 48. Yuyam neloke bata buri bhaga. Yuyam neloke bata buri bhaga. Lokam punana munayo biyanti. Lokam punana munayo biyanti. Yesham grihan avasititi shakshad. Yesham grihanan avasatiti shakshad. Gudam param brahma manusha lingam. Gudam param brahma manusha lingam. Yuyam neloke bata buri bhaga. Lokam punana manayo bhiyanti. Ishangri anan abasistiti shakshad. Gudham param brahma manushalingam. Yuyam naloke patapuri bhaga. Lokam punana manayo bhiyanti. Yeshangrihanam abasititi shakshad. Gudham param brahma manushalingam. Yuyam naloke patapuri bhaga. Lokam punana manayo bhiyanti. Ishangriyanan abashiti tekshad. Gudam param brahma manushalinga. Yuyam naloke bataburi avga. Lokam punana manayo bhiyanti. Ishangrihana vasati shakshad. Gudam param brahma manushalingam. Yuyam naloke bataburi bhaga. Lokam punana manayo bhiyanti. Ishangrihana vasati shakshad. Gudam param brahma manushalingam. Yuyam, all of you, the Pandavas, Niloke, within this material world. Bhata, however, Bodhibhaga, extremely fortunate. Lokam, all the planets. Punana, who can purify. Munaya, great saintly persons. Abhiyanti, almost always come to visit. Yesham, of whom? Rihan, the house. Avasati, resides in. Iti, thus. Shakshat, directly. Gudam, very confidential. Param Brahma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Manushalingam, appearing just like a human being. Translation. Narada Muni continued, my dear Maharaj Yudhisthira, all of you, the Pandavas, are extremely fortunate, for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, lives in your palace just like a human being. Great saintly persons know this very well, and therefore they constantly visit this house. Responsibly pleased. Narada Muni continued, my dear Maharaj Yudhisthira, all of you, the Pandavas, are extremely fortunate, for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, lives in your palace, just like a human being. Great saintly persons know this very well, and therefore they constantly visit this house. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. After hearing about the activities of Prahlad Maharaj, a pure devotee should be very anxious to follow in his footsteps. But such a devotee might be disappointed, thinking that not every devotee can come to the standard of Prahlad Maharaj. This is the nature of a pure devotee. He always thinks himself to be the lowest, to be incompetent and unqualified. Thus, after hearing the narration of Prahlad Maharaj's activities, Maharaj Yudhisthira, who was on the same standard of devotional service as Prahlad, might have been thinking of his own humble position. Narada Muni, however, could understand Maharaj Yudhisthira's mind, and therefore he immediately encouraged him by saying that the Pandavas were not less fortunate. They were as good as Prahlad Maharaj, because although Lord Nrsimhadev appeared for Prahlad, the Supreme Personality of Godhead in his original form as Krishna was always living with the Pandavas, Although the Pandavas, because of the influence of Krishna's Yogamaya, could not think of their fortunate position, every saintly person, including the great sage Narad, could understand it, and therefore they constantly visited Maharaj Yudhisthira. Any pure devotee who is constantly conscious of Krishna is naturally very fortunate. The word nir loke, meaning within the material world, indicates that before the Pandavas there had been many, many devotees, such as the descendants of the Yadu dynasty, and Vashishta, Marichi, Kajapa, Lord Brahma, and Lord Shiva, who were all extremely fortunate. The Pandavas, however, were better than all of them, because Krishna himself lived with them constantly. Narada Muni therefore specifically mentioned that within this material world, Nirloke, the Pandavas were the most fortunate. Om Ajnana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshuran Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhistam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamayam Tadati Swapadantikam Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhaktarinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyevacha Paditanam Bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Shishikar Nitai Maya Pashashi Ki Jai. So nice verse. Narada Muni is reminding, because we're hearing the written word, and there's a lot more going on, obviously, than just what's written. And so we get a little insight here that the reason why those words were spoken is because Narada Muni could see that Yudhisthira Maharaj was thinking. And I'm sure what we all must be thinking when we hear about the pastimes of Prahlad Maharaj, we think, I could never be that advanced, be that faithful, and just depend upon Krishna and not be afraid. And so that's not a bad sign. That's natural for a devotee to feel like that. And the examples are here in the Bhagavatam that maybe we can't immediately become like Prahlad Maharaj, but we can aspire to become like Prahlad Maharaj. So we start with the desire. Before we have the actual qualities, we desire those qualities. So we hear about the qualities, we think this is wonderful, and we desire. And it's interesting in the, it's called the Phalastuti, when it says the benedictions you receive. It doesn't say one who hears this pastime of Prahlad Maharaj and becomes exactly like Prahlad Maharaj, there'll be no anxiety and they'll go back to the spiritual world. It doesn't say that. It's not asking you to become Prahlad Maharaj. All the Bhagavatam is saying is listen to the pastimes about Prahlad Maharaj. Listen to his qualities. Listen to how wonderful he is. Appreciate that. And you can go home as well. That's all that's required. You just have to hear submissively. So that's a relief. So, of course, Yudhisthira Maharaj, I mean, normally you would think a person would be very puffed up, if you had the Queen. We had King Charles staying with us. You'd be saying, excuse me, I've got King Charles staying at our place. Think you can be a bit more respectful, So, but Yudhisthira Maharaj, although Krishna is staying with him, he has so much humility. So a little glimpse, a little insight into how Narada Muni is able to read. And also when Krishna's explaining to Arjuna about the demoniac qualities, before he starts to explain the demoniac qualities, he says, don't worry, you're born of divine nature. So Krishna's also foreseeing that maybe Arjuna will be thinking, I must be pretty demoniac, I'm going to be killing all my relatives now, my grandfather, my brothers. And so Krishna's explaining, no, but you're not killing them out of pride. Dambo Dapo Bhimanascha, you're not killing them out of pride and arrogance, but you're doing it because I'm asking you to do it. So you're not a demon. So Prabhupada saying, after hearing about the activities of Prahlad, a pure devotee should be very anxious to follow. in his footsteps. And at the same time, the devotee may be disappointed, thinking that he can't come to that standard. So, so one's qualified still to go back to Godhead, even though he doesn't come to that standard of Prahlad. This is the nature of a pure devotee. He always thinks himself to be the lowest, to be incompetent and unqualified. So it's one of the symptoms of pure devotional service is to consider yourself, what's the principle? Accept everything favorable, reject everything unfavorable. Consider yourself very humble, even though you may be very expert. So this is one of the qualifications of a devotee, that he doesn't feel, although he is very expert, but he's not proud, he doesn't consider himself. So that's the disposition of the devotee. So Maharaj Yudhisthira was on the same standard of devotional service as Prahlad, and he might have been thinking of his own humble position. So Narada Muni is encouraging him that that Krishna is residing there in their palace. And Krishna tells Arjuna that this is not the first time that we've been together. We've had many lifetimes. So they're eternal associates. So when Krishna comes down, always this pastime is taking place, and they're coming to assist him. And it came up the other day, somebody was asking a question, I think it was in the Japa Sangha actually, how can the devotees, how can Krishna keep enjoying his pastimes after he's done them so many times after a while? And we were reading in Vilap Kusumanjali, Shivaraj was explaining that every time Krishna sees Srimati Radharani, it's like the first time he's ever seen her. Always like that. It never becomes old and hackneyed. And in the same way, the devotee is, the Bhagavad Gita has been spoken every time to Arjuna, and Arjuna, it's like the first time he's ever heard it. So that's the nature of the Yoga Maya. So that everything stays fresh and everything's special, and we don't become, we don't take it for granted. And Bhakti distribution is like that as well. No matter how many times you go out, when you go out the next day, it's always like the first time you've ever been out. And it's always like that with japa as well, for me anyway. When I'm chanting my japa, it's like the first time although you may have had so many experiences and insights, when it comes to chanting, it's like you're stripped clean of all that, and you're just there now, the naked you. You're trying to take shelter of Krishna, and you can't bring anything with you and expect that Krishna's going to comply with something. Everything is just like in the moment, like the very first time. So that's the nature of spiritual life. Any devotee who's constantly conscious of Krishna is naturally very fortunate. So that's a distinction, because we can be conscious of Krishna, but the one who's very fortunate is the one who's constantly conscious of Krishna. Machita Savadar Gani. Krishna says, if you become conscious, so you'd think, well, I was conscious of Krishna a few weeks ago, so now I should be able to pass over all the obstacles of a conditional life. But when Krishna's saying, if you become conscious of me, he's meaning, if you become constantly conscious of me, then you'll pass over all the obstacles. And if you don't, because of false ego and not hearing me, then you'll be lost in the Shoshasini Vinanshasi. So that is the challenge. Can you be constantly conscious of Krishna? And that's what we're training ourselves to do, to become. And generally we become conscious of Krishna when things are difficult. And we forget Krishna when things are easy. And so it's counterintuitive. Like Queen Kunti was praying, allow the difficulties to be there all the time, because when they're there, then I'm forced to remember you. And if I can remember you, then I won't have to accept repeated birth and death. So, of course, it would be nicer that we could just remember Krishna without there having to be difficulties. So we could pray like that to Krishna, please allow me to become absorbed in you. And I don't need to have these difficulties to provoke me to become dependent upon you. So that means in the times when it's not so difficult, we have to be very careful not to lapse back into forgetting Krishna. If we can constantly remember Krishna, then all the problems will be free from all the problems. So the main problem really is just that we're forgetful of Krishna. And then the subheadings of problems are all different aspects of how that forgetfulness of Krishna affects us. And even if you're in the most difficult, taxing situation, if you remember Krishna, then it's not a problem. It's just an opportunity to remember Krishna. The word Niloki, meaning within the material world, indicates that before the Pandavas, there had been many, many devotees, and they were extremely fortunate. But the Pandavas were better than them all because Krishna lived with them constantly. Narada Muni, therefore. And it was very intimate because in the 11th chapter, Arjuna is regretting. He's saying, he sees the universal form and he realizes, wow, okay, this is God. And then he thinks, I've been very familiar, been over familiar with you, and now I'm really sorry that I'm like that. He has so much awe and reverence. It said that when the universal form was being shown, nobody on the battlefield could see it, but they could see Arjuna getting up and going down and paying his obeisances over and over again. But they couldn't see what it was, So Narada Muni therefore specifically mentioned that within this material world, the Pandavas were the most fortunate. And in the Brihad Bhagavatam Rita, there's different devotees, right, that are considered the most fortunate. Who was the first one? Was it Prahlad? And then he says the Pandavas, and then they said Uddhava. And eventually ended up being the gopis, right? They were the most fortunate. Any questions or comments? Yes, Prabhu. Yeah. 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 Well, for myself anyway, I would say, if you can't hold on, if you find yourself becoming expert or accomplished at something, and you find that pride coming in, and you can't eradicate that just from hearing the philosophy and praying and chanting, then a really good way to do that is to go out on book distribution, because it's a very purifying process. And if there's a tinge of prestige or pride, then though a soul may be conditioned, he can smell it a mile off, and he'll very readily let you know that he's not impressed with it. So that's the wonderful benediction about going out. I mean, you could stop someone and say, "Excuse me, I'm the GBC for Les Mahego, and I was temple commander, and I was temple president for a while, but I'm not, and I have disciples. I think you should give me 20 quid." It's like, who cares? You're nothing. You're nobody. And if you approach them with an attitude, they're just like, get out of my face. So by going out on the front line and doing book distribution, or Harinam Sankirtan, or preaching, or giving Krishna consciousness to the conditioned souls in whatever way that you can, then that process helps to alleviate the shadow of pride that may be cast upon us, And we're just learning now, Manashiksha, I'm only on verse 1 still. And Guru Goste, and it's saying, Sada Dambam Hipfa Kuru, all the pride, and pride and hypocrisy and deceit are all linked together, actually. So we have to proactively, actively beg to get free from it. It's like default. It's not, oh, I just found out I was proud. It's like, it's no surprise. We're all here in the material because, and if we just relax, then we will naturally fall into being proud like that. So it's a constant endeavor, and the preaching helps, it challenges us to put aside that pride and approach people.
situation in the fact that another situation if someone gets better, gets some funds, then they can become local.
Yeah.
It may not simply just be that the activity, you just want to couldn't find kind of mistake with it, but
Yeah.
sometimes someone becomes good at something, and they can really well do that, then they start.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know somebody that was very good at doing Sankirtan, and then although the people didn't say it to him, they were aware that there was pride there, but they were still affectionate and they still helped him, you know. And if you continue on in the process, then eventually you become aware of it. Krishna's really kind, actually. He doesn't just smash it all in one go, because that's really what we're made up of, you know. We have our like ego of what we think we are, and we function like that. If someone just came along and just smashed it completely, it'd be like, oh, I can't do anything then, you know. It's just too overwhelming. So generally the way Krishna does is he just takes a particle away every day, and bit by bit, over a period of time. Only when we're strong enough, actually. Shiva Ramaj was saying, to bear the weight of humility takes a lot of strength, actually. It's one of the greatest austerities, is to be humble, you know. It's a great weight to bear, the weight of humility. And, you know, if you jump into a gym and you think, right, I fancy that, and you just grab those, and it's got like 5 of those big round things at the end, I think I'll go for that, you know. What you do, you start with a little one, and over the years, eventually you'll get to the point where you can be really humble, you know. Generally, when we get humbled, we're a little bit discouraged by it, and then later on, when we've recovered to some degree, then we can feel the benefit of it. But at the time, it can be really devastating. Everything we thought we were has been smashed to smithereens, and we're wondering, well, who are we then? You know, and it takes a little bit of time to kind of assimilate everything, and then recalibrate ourselves into the reality of what we really are. You know, and then that's only a gradual awakening. Yeah, well, generally we can't, unfortunately. So it's a bit too toing and froing. We take a step forward, and then we get pushed back, and then we go forward, and then we go back, until we get to the point of being nishta, where we become fixed. We're rooted, deeply rooted in the foundational understanding that we are very insignificant, and then we don't get so affected anymore by what's going on. Because one side of the coin is we become proud, and the other side of the coin is we become very discouraged, because that's the nature of false ego. So the false ego's got a duality. You're the world's best, and then you're the world's worst. That's the duality of false ego. And then when you get into the middle of the road, you realize, okay, you're doing things, but, you know, they're not that brilliant. Okay, I did do that, but it wasn't, you know, could have done a lot better, but it wasn't that bad. You know, it was okay, you know. And then you're kind of in the middle of the road, and like Kadamba Karamaj, he put a book together on chanting, and he was asking different devotees, and he asked Satsvarup Maharaj, what's your realization after all these years of chanting? And he says, my realization is that you should just chant like a Brajbasi villager. Like no big thing. I'm not going to be doing a fantastic japa period now, but it's not going to be terrible either. It's just part of my life. It's just what I do, you know. And that was what was wonderful when I first went over. I'd been a devotee for 8 years, and we first went over to Vrindavan, and people are just getting up and putting their bead bags on. You know, there's no temple commander getting on their case. It's just what they've always done. It's just like an integral part. It's just a natural way of life, you know. You chant, you hear Bhagavatam. No one thinks they're like Narada Muni or somebody far out. It's just what you do, you know. There's no big ego there. So I think as ISKCON develops, as the centuries go by, we'll develop this culture, you know, where it'll just be a natural thing to do Krishna consciousness, to do books, and don't be so much ego there and pride. Oh, okay, one ear, yeah.
Shooting yoga Maya, then you just do animals can really
Grasp the significance of it, yeah.
unfortunately
Yeah.
Krishna's living in their house.
Yeah,
So but that was yoga Maya, that was like going to time staying on the temple.
yeah,
So you're not thinking how fortunate we are. And it's like,
yeah,
it's like you forget how fortunate we are.
yeah.
It's like yoga Maya is like Mahamaya.
Mahamaya. Like we're reading Vilap Kusumanjali, Raghunath Das, one minute he's with Radharani and he's Rati Manjari, the next minute he's back in the sadhaka form and he's feeling so unqualified and so unworthy. So immediately the Yogamaya comes in. Whereas, we'd be like, I was just with Radharani and I'm such and such a Manjari, there'd be so much pride there, Mahamaya would come. Of course, you wouldn't get to that stage in the first place. But that's what the Mahamaya does, yeah. And what was it? Nrsimha Kavacha said the two things to remember in deity worship was always remember Krishna as a person, and was it cleanliness or punctuality? Those two things, he said. And if you forget that, then that's one form or another of pride. Damban, we're reading different versions of the Manashiksha because there's commentaries after it, and the Damban word, it's generally referred to as pride, but pride really breaks down into a lot of things, It also is compared to a woman that eats flesh, associating with a woman, and a prostitute that eats flesh. That's also, and because it's deceitful. So there's a lot in there. And then Prabhupada also said the sound vibration of the Maha Mantra dissolves the false ego. So it's the false identification that causes the pride. So the sound of the mantra breaks down the false ego. So all the problems, the pride, the arrogance, the conceit, that's all, the adhesive is the false ego, that we're identifying with all this as ourself. So you take the false ego away and everything dismantles. It all breaks down, Srila Prabhupada, they would say, you've done amazing, it's wonderful, your achievements, and he would just say, it's just by the mercy of my Guru Maharaj. So there's no false ego there. And when you're like that, that's when Krishna can really give the results. He can really make you successful. When he knows it's not going to make you proud, then he can make you do huge on Sankirtan. And that's what Gauri Devi Das was saying. She said, the problem isn't not doing well on Sankirtan. The problem is doing well on Sankirtan and remembering that it's Krishna. That's the real challenge. Yeah. Yeah. The main cause of forgetfulness of Krishna. There's a few things, isn't there? There's offense, aparad, seva aparad, nama aparad, Vaishnava aparad. There's attachment, trishna, a thirst for material things. Like we're in the transitional stage right now. We're transitioning. People are transitioning. We're transitioning from being proud to come to the point of being humble. So there's a gradation as you're going through. So we have a general remembrance of Krishna. The more we practice Krishna consciousness, we have a general remembrance of Krishna. Things we know we have duties to perform. We know the services to do. We know we have to look after devotees. We know we have to read. We know we have to chant. We have to follow these principles. So we have a general awareness but the full-blown darshan of Krishna, that takes time to unfurl. And Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says that in the initial stages we're chanting Namabas, the sun hasn't actually come over the horizon just yet. So we're still in the dark, but we can kind of make our way around and avoid objects and holes in the ground to some degree. And then after a while, you just see the tip of the sun come over, and then that's the beginning of Shuddhanam. Then everything's very clear, you know. So the forgetfulness is a gray area where we're becoming more aware. So as we become more capable of chanting the holy name purely, that forgetfulness will eventually be dissipated. Krishna Surya Sama Maya Haya Andakara Yahan Krishna Tahanai Maya Adhikara. Krishna is light, Maya is darkness. We're trying to come towards the light. Jai. Iskon Guru Ki, Srila Prabhupada Ki, Nitai Gaura Premanandi.